When World War II ended, the UK, France, the Soviet Union, the United States and China became permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, designed to oversee international peace, security and law as the world rebuilt itself. However, 75 years on, is the current global balance of power still what it once was? Many have now started to question the legitimacy of the United Nations Security Council, and in particular the role of certain member states, in particular Britain. As the UK stumbles out of the European Union, should the tiny little island still hold its place on such an important committee? According to Dr. Azim Ibrahim, an academic and scholar from the Centre for Global Policy, Britain is no longer seen as a global power, with anyone wishing to deal with Europe now knocking on the doors of Berlin to seek clarification, which is clearly a humbling and humiliating factor for London to accept. It seems that the UK is still very much stuck in the past when it comes to international relations, with Britain still idolising the halcyon days of imperialism and world dominance. However, with the UK now a shadow of their former glory, it seems that the UK is just a tiny little country with a very oversized past. One has to then legitimately raise the question as to why the UK feels then the need to remain part of such an organisation, when the reality is that times have changed dramatically since the end of the World War, and that Germany is now the leading power in Europe, and hence maybe should be reflected so on the United Nations Security Council's chamber benches.
The most important role of the United Nations, and this was conceived right from the start, is to make sure that conflicts aren't allowed to develop. Now, conflicts are being allowed to develop, and that's because the UN Security Council, as you rightly say, is an old-fashioned institution. So we've got the USA, the UK, France, China and Russia as the 5 permanent members. The fact is things have moved on.
With the British now failing to agree any notion of a post-Brexit trade deal with the Europeans, it's hence no wonder that the island nation has become the laughingstock not only of the EU, but also of the rest of the world, which hence backs the argument of not being able to take the country seriously on the international arena, and in particular in the corridors of the United Nations Security Council, where it seems competition is on the rise to oust the Brits onto the back benches. Many people say that if something's not broken, then don't fix it. But for the United Nations Security Council, the time has surely come for the rusty machine to receive an upgrade. It's clear that as things stand, the Security Council is just not working. But will this age-old institution ever really be reformed? As mentioned, we have raised the question as to why certain nations are still on the board. But is it time for multiple new players to shine as well? When it comes to reform, it's not only the Germans who should be considered for a permanent seat, but other emerging powers too, with the likes of India, Japan and Brazil, all proposing valid cases for a position on the Council. African nations are also underrepresented in the modern arena, as well as the fact that not enough non-permanent members are invited. But are the suggestions of reform in vain? As let's be honest, the United Nations Security Council has shown that its power is not taken seriously by some members of the United Nations, with the Israeli regime in particular brushing off resolutions that don't suit them as and when they please, with Resolution 2334 being a prime example.
Well, the United Nations has become very weak in terms of its prime job, which is stopping wars, stopping regime change. I mean, these sorts of actions, for example, by the Israelis in the West Bank annexing parts of the country, turning whole areas into effectively concentration camps, this kind of thing is what the UN was designed to stop, and it's proved very ineffective. So one of the things that would definitely make a difference is if the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, was to take on a much more proactive stance on these military conflicts, which he's simply not doing.
The current global crisis in the form of the coronavirus has also shown that the Security Council is missing in action, as the body has failed to take decisive action in stopping the spread of the pandemic, calling for arms to be laid down to reach those in need, and of course, failing to end the sanctions on nations who cannot obtain the medical supplies that they very much need. Is this shadowy and hence futile organisation then nothing more than a dying club for executives that now serves as nothing more than a showpiece to the world, yet fails to adapt, transform and protect the people it was once set up to serve?